Order. Martin Wrigley to move the motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We are at key times at the NHS Federated Data Platform. We are at key times for the NHS as it changes from analogue to digital, and data is absolutely key to achieving better health results for all of our constituents and the future of the NHS. AI analysis of scans can spot patterns of disease before the human eye, and modern communications can be much more effective than simply sending letters that often arrive late. However, we are at a junction when we can correct a series of mistakes made in the direction of travel in this process. And I ask the government to mind the gap between expectation and reality. We can and need to change. In November 2023, a contract for services approaching £500 million was signed for the Federated Data Platform. The Government Contract Tracker describes a data platform owned and controlled by the NHS to unlock the power of NHS data to understand patterns, solve problems, plan services for local populations, and ultimately transfer them the health and care of the people they serve. Sadly, the FDP developed by Palantir is far from that description. The NHS is an inherently distributed organisation with trusts in charge of their own IT. And while NHS England has been working on a unified data dictionary and standards, imposing a single central IT solution has yet to work. Indeed, a single central system can become a single point of failure. Such a critical element of national infrastructure must be under full control, fully owned and trusted. While I understand the appeal of a slick salesman who persuades that they can solve all the NHS problems, can build that one system to bind them all, can use AI like magic to provide all the answers. Sadly, it isn't reality. So I ask, is Palantir's FDP a product the NHS can own and trust? Or have we bought the emperor's new clothes that after huge investment leaves us with nothing? I will outline why this solution is wrong on 3 significant points. The contract is wrong, the solution is wrong, and the supplier is wrong, and simply not delivering to their promises.
Will my honourable friend give way on that point?
I will.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way at that point and for securing this very important debate at this critical point. Does my honourable friend agree that the opaque procurement of the Palantir contract, one of Mandelson's dodgy deals, is deeply concerning? And does he agree that the full details of Mandelson's actions and the Prime Minister's in 2025 to visit Palantir headquarters during his visit must be made public?
I agree with the Honourable Lady entirely, and the secret meeting between Boris Johnson and Dominic Cummings with Peter Thiel, the founder and chair of Palantir, in 2019 that started this whole thing, for which there are no minutes. That must be clarified as well. I'll be asking the Minister to consider using the contract renewal point to stop the chaotic expansion of the Palantir platform monopoly, to work to a staged exit with a retender for British companies to build a replacement for Palantir, and deliver a better long-term solution, providing British sovereign capabilities in line with principles outlined by our Science and Research Minister and the Prime Minister. Let's start with the current contract. This delivers a subscription service that leaves no deliverables after the subscription. No software, no improvements, no intellectual property after spending over £330 million. All specially written software, intellectual property rights, belong to the supplier, says the contract. All rights to any know-how is explicitly retained by the supplier and not passed across on termination of the contract. The contract delivers no software, not one line, just a subscribed service, a permanent lock-in, a single point of failure. Why are we building a leased service wrapped in glossy marketing promises rather than a product the NHS can own and trust? We're paying the supplier to hire Accenture, PricewaterhouseCoopers, NHS experts and consultants to create a solution that we do not own. The supplier does. They use external AI platforms from OpenAI and Anthropic and bring questionable value themselves. The supplier had no expertise in health prior to them buying in an opportunity to provide their system to help manage the data from the COVID vaccine programme. A 3-year contract asks for 13 core deliverables, 13 core capabilities to be delivered. According to both the National Audit Office and the supplier themselves, after nearly 3 years, they have partially delivered on 3 or 4 of them. Honourable members may have received letters from the supplier, who has taken to sponsoring newsletters that we see every day as well. When in front of the Select Committee, the only benefit offered by the supplier and by NHS England was an improvement in managing staff rotas to deliver higher operation throughput, which these days can be done by a relatively simple app. This is beneficial, but perhaps relates more to government's improvements in staffing and pay than to any magic from Palantir. They claim waiting list reductions by removal of people who don't respond to messages. There is no external scrutiny or validation of results. This is a dreadful contract, and it is not in the national interest. I will.
I'm very grateful to my honourable friend. I have to say he's making an excellent case, and I know that he'll be coming on in a moment to the point where this contract obviously is coming to an end, and indeed is being reviewed, I'm sure, by government, and the minister will be responding to that at the moment. But if we are to bring this, and we're encouraging the government to bring this contract to a close for the reasons I think he's properly explaining, he will perhaps also agree that we go through a transition period to ensure that the conditions which he's described are addressed, so that this government can benefit from the software that has been developed as a result of it.
And I think he's been reading my speech in advance. Absolutely, I agree. I see that the outgoing NHS England Chief Data and Analytics Officer, Ming Tang, has publicly joined Palantir's fight back, saying the system is delivering. Having introduced and lobbied to deploy Palantir, she would say that, wouldn't she? Yeah. Given Palantir's habit of lobbying civil servants and the revolving door from government, I wait to see where she will end up. I asked the Minister to review the contract, particularly in light of government policies to invest in UK tech, value for money, technical lock-in and key performance indicators and strategic supplier status, which they should have. Just one more statement, then I'll give way. I asked the Minister to reject extending the existing contract that locks the NHS in forever and delivers nothing tangible. I will give way.
I thank the honourable gentleman for giving way, and he's making some important points. Just yesterday, I highlighted the Scottish Government's decision to buy Chinese buses, which come with a serious security risk. It would be wrong of me not to do the same when UK Government takes the same risks. We have some of the finest minds in the world here in the UK, but too frequently lose them to foreign firms out of our control. Does my honourable friend agree with me that we should be developing Britain's skill base here, and whether it be buses or AI, we should put British jobs and British security first?
I absolutely agree with my honourable friend, and the Prime Minister does as well, as does the Science and Research Minister. So I'll go on to the solution. The solution is wrong. There have been many attempts to try and unify the NHS by using a single IT system. Each one has failed. In reality, we must think of the NHS as thousands of independent organisations. NHS England has been guiding organisations towards a combined data dictionary for more than 10 years, combining definitions of what data means, how it's recorded and the way it's used. After 3 years, we have about half of the 200-odd NHS trusts across 42 ICBs quoted as live on the FDP, and only a quarter of them report benefits from using it. I will.
I thank my honourable friend for Newton Abbot for giving way. His expertise on this really is impressive. I recently spent a shift with South Western Ambulance and saw how critical it was for them to be able to access both GP and hospital data. We had a lady who had a heart attack and we didn't know who she was. Does he agree with me that the priority should be for the different elements of the NHS to talk to each other rather than be scraped by a third party like Palantir?
Yeah.
I thank the honourable member very much and do agree. At the moment, Palantir will not enable GPs to see hospital data or paramedics or anybody else. They will have to go through Palantir to see that data, and they will not be able to access your patient records from the hospital to the GP or from the GP to the hospital or vice versa. Palantir, like any data warehouse, requires connecting software that reaches into each of the NHS's internal systems and gathers data. This data gathering is being done NHS Trust by NHS Trust, as there are differences inside each one. This is embedding the use of Palantir-owned code inside every NHS Trust by creating custom connecting software to connect and translate data. In Devon, for example, the local ICB has celebrated as a major success the adoption of the same electronic patient record across Devon's 4 main hospitals. These have just gone live in Torbay Trust that serves most of my Newton Abbot constituency. In any organisation as diverse as the NHS and with such distributed responsibility, you can either try to impose one massive system to rule them all or build interoperability. Interoperability would allow GPs to see hospital records and vice versa. Palantir is not doing this. Interoperability is how massive systems work, like the internet or mobile phone networks, not relying on one single system or supplier. This way, a modular system, a bit like Lego, can be constructed that is overall immune to changes elsewhere in the wider environment, providing only the specific data required to deliver improvements in services. This form of system builds a long-term capability, delivers without requiring locked-in expensive subscription, and can be built by a UK tech consortium in parallel to phasing out Palantir, building UK sovereign solutions, tech skills and competencies. Meanwhile, NHS England's October 25 medium-term framework mandates all NHS providers of acute, community and mental health services to sign up to the FDP. This demands the removal also of any existing local data analysis system. All of this results in further lock-in. I will.
Julian Smith.
One of the issues in His Excellency's speech he hasn't discussed is that of governance. The commissioner of these contracts is the NHS, and it's also the main oversight body. He's put forward a black and white sort of end the contract or maintain the contract solution. But is there not also a case for a more robust governance structure, whether it's giving more powers to the National Data Guardian or whether it's setting up a bespoke oversight body for this contract?
I thank the member if he looks at the contract and sees that it is subscription only, deliveries under supplier software, none under third-party software deliveries, none, and any programming written underneath this contract is ownership of Palantir. But this contract has to be adapted for any next phases to move them out. Palantir is not only the wrong technical solution, NHS users report it's awful to use. An open letter to NHS England said, "We already have similar tools in use that presently extend the capability and application of what the FDP is currently trying to develop or roll out. Also, we're being forced to use a convoluted system that makes even the simplest tasks feel like pulling teeth. It's demoralising and honestly, it's a waste of everyone's time and public money." And not only could similar functionality have been delivered at a fraction of the cost, but existing tools are already better integrated, more intuitive and more conducive to collaboration. And that's from an NHS data analyst. Early 2025, Greater Manchester ICB reported FDP does not currently have any system-level products that offer the same or better functionality compared to the custom-built software already in use for NHS Greater Manchester. And an NHS developer concerned about Palantir wrote to me saying, "There are any number of reassuringly boring companies that could deliver this contract, many of them based in the UK, and then we could just get on with the exciting work of using technology to improve the care for our patients." Quite right too. We must halt this path of chaos before the costs build any higher. I asked the Minister to use the change from NHS England to allow a change of direction towards a distributed, interoperable UK sovereign solution. I asked the Minister to cancel the expansion of FDP to community and mental health service providers. And it's the wrong supplier. The name Palantir comes from a magical seeing stone in The Lord of the Rings. It's how the evil Lord Sauron corrupted the good wizard Saruman. I think we should have known at the beginning. Funded initially by the CIA as a defence contractor, Palantir's vision is to become the default operating system for data-driven decisions in high-stakes institutions. Palantir's chair, Peter Thiel, wrote, "I no longer believe that freedom and democracy are compatible." And he warns the coming of the Antichrist in the form of an oppressive world government. Palantir's stated aim is to have domination over most government departments across the US and allies, including healthcare. Louis Mosley of Palantir UK recommended the UK government develops a common operating system combining healthcare and central government data. This is just mad. This is a company that builds lock-in into its architecture. It is a clear business tactic. Palantir's Foundry system was installed for £1 to manage COVID vaccination programme after high-pressure lobbying and persuasion. They bought the advantage for future contracts by providing the system for free. The company had no health experience prior to the pandemic and demonstrates a lack of data security by design. But the main issue is trust. The future of the NHS depends on intelligent use of data with patients' trust. Gaining the public's trust for such research with AI involved is going to be hard enough anyway, without a company like Palantir controlling it all. Palantir and their NHS England advocates claim big benefits to the NHS. The British Medical Journal this week published analysis of the initial Palantir trial at Chelsea and Westminster Hospital that shows the benefits to be exaggerated and untrue. National Audit Office are yet to assess the value of the deliveries to date and cannot confirm the numbers in Palantir's claims. Even if you accept they've delivered some benefits, it's hardly worth 330 million, or indeed the NISTA estimate whole life cost of over £1 billion. In addition, Palantir's history with the government is not good. After secret meetings and intensive lobbying in 2020, Palantir won a 27 million border control contract. This was without competitive tender, just like the MOD contracts. The border system was constantly terminated as it had no users and no value. We need to replace Palantir, the chaotic, all-seeing, single point of failure, data-hungry AI solution. We need a well-architecture, security by design, resilient and nationally significant bedrock for FDP in the NHS for years to come. This must be powered by UK technology. This will build UK skills and business and will pay dividends for years to come. This will build trust from the UK public. The BMA say an FDP has the potential to transform how care is delivered, but only if it's done right, via a UK-owned FDP that has full confidence and support of the professions and patients. I ask the Minister to take action now to stop the expansion of the Palantir solution, review the dreadful subscription contract with Palantir, rebuild the FDP project to deliver a sound, sovereign system to make our NHS thrive in the world of data-driven health. Thank you.
Yeah. Right. Mr. Wrigley asked me if he could sum up. His chances were in his hands. Now, I'm afraid, because it's so popular, everybody's down to 2.5 minutes. OK. I call Dawn Butler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's wonderful to serve under your chairmanship. The reality is the government has inherited a mess. And so we have to not take responsibility for that mess. It's been, I congratulate the member for Newton Abbey for bringing forward this debate. And he mentioned about the £1 that Palantir paid to get their foot in the door. Some may say that was a smart business move. Some may say that was a con or a trap. Now, the first responsibility of a government is to make sure it protects its citizens. And what we have to do when it comes to AI and data is have AI and data sovereignty. So we must ask ourselves whether Palantir allows us to have AI and data sovereignty. I think the answer to that will be no. We have too much reliance on US systems, and I was in hospital just the other week, and the system is designed in a US way where everything has to be scanned in. So it's designed to scan in QR codes at every action, and that's because in America, you pay for everything, whether you have a blood test or anything else. We don't have that because luckily we have the NHS. So, and to say that we can't do better in the UK just isn't true. And Unison and BMA have severe concerns about Palantir, and have said what they would like the government to do is have a system that's based on ethics and values. And I feel that that should be our starting point, that we should have a system of ethics and values. And there are better alternatives. It's not true that there isn't. And in the BMA and Unison briefing, it talks about local platforms already exceed FDP capability. For example, Open Safely, developed at the University of Oxford, is an open source privacy-preserving platform and has supported over 200 NHS research projects. Now, the reality is 30 people decided on this contract. Unison represents 1.3 million public service workers. BMA represent all doctors. They all have concerns. I think the government need to cut loose the relationship with Palantir and have a transparent review which includes workers, trade unions and the public. Thank you.
Iqbal Mohammed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairship. We're super proud of the role we play, especially in places we can't talk about. Palantir is here to disrupt and, when it's necessary, to scare our enemies and, on occasion, kill them. That was a quote by Palantir CEO Alex Karp in an investor's briefing. If it looks evil, if it smells evil, if it behaves evil, then it is evil. I would like to thank my honourable friend, the member for Newton Abbot, for securing this debate. And given the lack of time, I'm going to have to cut short my speech. So we must examine Palantir's record and elsewhere in our assessment of its suitability as a supplier to the NHS. Palantir has a long-standing contract with ICE in the US, providing tools to track and target migrants, and this facilitated racial profiling, family separation, and due process violation. In January 2024, Palantir entered into a strategic partnership with the Israeli Ministry of Defense to support war-related missions, meaning its advanced data systems are used to perpetuate a genocide against the Palestinian people. Reports from Novara Media and the Financial Times state that the NHS staff have been warned they could be fired for criticising the NHS contract with Palantir, and that NHS organisations are under pressure to sign up voluntarily to the Palantir data system, with technicians being told to stop working on alternate systems. The Swiss government has previously rejected engagement with Palantir, raising national security concerns. In the US, hospital systems in New York have moved away from Palantir arrangements, again citing data governance and control. And here at home, uptake of the FDP remains uneven, with many NHS professionals reluctant and, in some cases, refusing to engage with it. And perhaps most concerning of all is it has been reported that patient data opt-outs do not apply to the federated data platform due to a legal direction issued under Section 254 of the Health and Social Care Act 2012. Yet that direction has not been published, named, or subject to scrutiny. So the debate is more about technology. It's more about who we trust to sit at the heart of our NHS. And to that question, the government must think again.
I'm grateful for the opportunity to raise this issue today because my constituents in South Derbyshire, like millions of NHS patients across the country, deserve honest answers about who holds their most private data and why. The Federated Data Platform is in principle exactly the kind of innovation that can help transform our NHS, connecting fragmented data across trusts, reducing discharge delays and cutting cancer diagnosis time. And these are goals that every member of this House can support. The question before us today is not whether we want a modern data-driven NHS, we do. The question is whether Palantir is the right company to deliver it. The 330 million contract was awarded to Palantir to deliver the FDP, but its co-founder, Peter Thiel, has been openly hostile to the very idea of the NHS. So should a company of this character be trusted as a custodian of the intimate health records of tens of millions of British citizens? I do not dismiss the technology itself. The platform is genuinely impressive, but we cannot separate a company from its leadership. The Health Secretary himself has acknowledged that when you look at the political views and outlook of Palantir's founders and bosses, they would sit well to the right of even an official opposition in this country, or the one that would like to think it's the official opposition of this country. When the co-founder of a company holds our NHS in open contempt, and when its chief executive is a prominent ally of an administration that this House has repeatedly criticised, it is entirely reasonable to ask whether this company should occupy such a sensitive position at the heart of our public health infrastructure. This isn't ideology, it is scrutiny, and it is precisely what this House is here to provide. We also know that when the contract was first published, 417 out of 586 pages were completely blanked out, and it took a legal challenge from the Good Law Project to force the release of a substantially redacted version. This is not transparency that the public has the right to expect. Now, if we want NHS staff and patients to embrace a digital future, the future cannot be built on a foundation they do not trust.
Abbot for giving us the opportunity to think about and discuss this important issue. Central to my contribution will be the issue of trust, which the honourable gentleman referred to as well. We stand at a crossroads in the history of our National Health Service. For too long, our frontline staff, the very heartbeat of our communities, have been battling a 21st century crisis with the 20th century tools. They are held back by fragmented systems that do not speak to one another, and waiting lists that remain stubbornly high, expectations and red tape that are obstacles to actually practising and helping our people. I want to look at the issue of trust very, very clearly. The Federated Data Platform, the FDP, represents a significant opportunity to change that. By connecting trust and boards, we aren't just moving numbers on a screen, we're making sure that surgery happens sooner rather than later. My party, the DUP, supports the maximisation of technology, but we will never support the compromise of trust. Protecting health and protecting rights must go hand in hand. 3 issues and 3 questions to the Minister. Local control and accountability. There must not be a Big Brother database in Whitehall. Each hospital trust must remain the master of its own house, acting as sole controller of its data. So can Government and the Minister confirm that assurance that private partners are mere processors locked out from selling our data or using it to train their own models? And secondly, uncompromising security. With the rise in cyber threats, good enough is no longer enough. Government must ensure that the privacy-enhancing technology promised to us is not just a secondary feature, but instead a robust audited shield that keeps personal identities anonymous. And thirdly, patient empowerment. My vision for the NHS is one where every citizen can access and input into their own medical record online. Data should empower the patient, not just the system. We've heard the concerns concerning the choice of suppliers and the ethics of data sharing, and these are concerns that we must be certain we have solutions to, and not just hopeful that it will work. I conclude with this, Madam Chair. The Democratic Unionist Party, my party, and myself as our health spokesperson, wants Northern Ireland and the United Kingdom to lead the world in e-health. But we will only do so if we can look every patient in the eye and say, your data is safe, your privacy is absolute, and your care is our only priority. I look to the Minister and this Government to fully understand that and to agree those 3 principles. Thank you.
Indra Mishra.
Thank you, it's a pleasure to this debate with you. Can I thank the Honourable Member for Newton Abbot for securing this debate. From links to serious human rights abuses to an ongoing lack of clarity around the security of sensitive patient data, a large number of my constituents in Stockport have raised concerns about the ethical implications of using Palantir technology within our NHS. The member who secured the debate mentioned that a Times newspaper report on 9th of April told us that the data chief of the NHS remains committed to the use of Palantir's technology across our health service, despite the company's ties with ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and US military. I've written to the Chief Executive of Stockport NHS Foundation Trust, as well as the Greater Manchester ICB, on this issue. Amnesty International and MedAct, an organisation bringing together health workers in the UK, have been vocal in urging hospitals not to use Palantir software, and have highlighted the link to some very concerning instances of human rights abuses. I'm limited by time, and he has already contributed. Please accept my apologies. Patients must feel confident that their data is handled transparently, securely, and in a way that reflects British values. This is why I believe we should be investing in and developing our own sovereign technological capability here in Britain. I want to see Britain at the forefront of science and technology, and that starts with backing our own institutions. The UK has a proud heritage of education with some of the finest universities and institutions in the world. We should be investing in them instead of relying heavily on foreign companies. France has set a good example of this. The French government is moving all government desktops from Windows to Linux as part of a nationwide strategy to reduce reliance on US tech giants. I believe that we should take similar action here in the UK. Retendering the federated data platform could benefit the country as a whole, addressing ethical and security concerns, but also delivering long-term economical and technological benefits.
I know the Minister, the member for Glasgow South West, is an NHS worker himself, a transplant surgeon, and I want to thank him on behalf of people of Stockport for the work he does for the NHS. And I know he will take seriously that it's not just about the cost of the £330 million to the British taxpayer that members, cross-party members here are concerned about, but they're also concerned about their private personal health data, the ethical behaviour of that company. So I hope he will take the concerns raised today back to the government on an urgent basis. Thank you.
Thank you, David Siobhan. Always a pleasure to serve with your chairship. A nation like a person is judged by the company it keeps, and in this case, the companies it keeps handing taxpayers' money to. I also tend to count my worth by the list of my enemies, and if I make one of Palantir today, then I can count this as a good day's work. So, to be clear, the government's engagement with Palantir is shameful. Peter Thiel, the founder of Palantir, is a dangerous extremist who has called the Nazi Carl Schmitt a major influence on his thinking. He has allowed Palantir to provide sensitive data to Donald Trump's far-right thugs in ICE to add power to their cruel elbow as it comes crashing down on communities. Peter Thiel hates our values and hates the very principle of our NHS itself. He once told the Oxford Students' Union that our love for the NHS is a form of Stockholm Syndrome. Palantir and Peter Thiel must have their hands ripped off of our NHS before it is too late. We cannot stand idly by and let the NHS be rescued from years of Conservative neglect just to have critical functions and funding handed to the far-right US tech billionaire. The interweaving of Palantir's opaque software with the framework of the NHS would make us dangerously dependent on and vulnerable to the whims of his strange organisation. This Labour government has had 2 years to signal their intention to end their partnership with Palantir, but have failed to do so. So, can I ask the Minister, firstly, are the government investigating ongoing reports of unethical lobbying efforts within the NHS and shady public relations by Palantir? For instance, we've seen allegations that the joint chair of North West London's 4 major hospital trusts was privately urging colleagues to add more patient data into the platform at the same time as advising Palantir through Global Counsel. Secondly, have the government taken any steps to make sure that the security and integrity of NHS data systems are ironclad in the event of any rogue actions not just by Palantir, but by any third-party contractor? At that point, simple litigation for breach of contract will be moot. The damage will have been done. The government shouldn't need to do this. They should just wind down the contract. But at the very least, they ought to tell my constituents who've written to me on this topic whether or not their concerns raised in this debate are falling on deaf ears or not.
And I thank the member for Newton Abbott for this excellent debate today and agree with every word that has been spoken to date about this US spy tech company, which is now deep into the data of our NHS and, of course, patients, our constituents across the country. And we've got to take example from the Swiss government, which withdrew its access to Palantir, or Palantir's access to its data because of risks of US intelligence, gaining access to sensitive data, potential loss of national sovereignty, and also dependence on foreign specialists. And as has already been mentioned, when we know in the US it has been used to power up the ICE teams to target its actions, I fear what a future government could do with that data. And whilst this government, I'm sure, wouldn't even consider such measures, a future Reform UK government perhaps could use that to target very vulnerable people. And as a result of that, we know already there is significant health inequalities in our health system. And you can just imagine minoritised groups not sharing vital health information with clinicians for fear of what may happen in the future, widening health inequalities and putting those individual patients at risk. And I know, as a former clinician in the NHS, trust is key. And if you do not have the confidence and trust of your patients, that results in people having worse health outcomes. So in the interest of our constituents' health, I urge the government to end this contract. And I do note that the former Secretary of State for Health who signed the contract hasn't turned up to defend his record in today's debate. And as a result, I think that says everything about the lack of accountability there is behind signing these contracts. Palantir itself has 8 major footprints across government departments and public services to the tune of over £800 million. And as a result, we really need to understand what these companies, and they're not the only ones, but other clients of Global Counsel like the US like the farmer deals as well that have been signed, unaccountable to this House. And it comes back to this question, Chair, that I really want to raise is, how do we hold government to account for the contracts it signs? Because often we are here, it feels like just negotiating on legislation but not on the big decisions, and big decisions like signing major financial contracts in the NHS.
Adam.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, let me be clear, as a practicing optometrist, and the Minister in his position will agree, that there's nothing more wonderful than touching a button and the data of your patient going to the right people. The patients can be treated appropriately and on time. And in fact, the Dossier and the Swindells review published last year confirmed exactly that our health data system is broken and fragmented, and that costs patients dearly. The public overwhelmingly supports better data sharing, and so do I. The question is not, in my opinion, whether we need data sharing, but who is responsible for this modern-day oil. Palantir, as has been alluded, has been named after the Seeing Stones from the book Lord of the Rings, the Palantiri. These stones wield enormous power. And I want to be fair about these. The stones themselves are not good or evil. They are powerful instruments of vision. In the right hands, they bring clarity and wisdom. The problem, as Tolkien understood it, is never the stone. It is who is holding it. So let's have a look at who are holding these stones. Alex Karp, already been mentioned, this year said, "We want to scare our enemies and on occasions kill them." Its co-founder, Peter Thiel, has written that he no longer believes freedom and democracy are compatible. He has said that NHS is making people sick, and he has called the British public love for the jewel in our crown, the National Health Service, a form of Stockholm Syndrome. These are stated beliefs of the men at the top of a company where we have handed £330 million to and a £1.5 billion strategic partnership with the British state. And the ambitions do not stop there. Palantir's Chief Operating Officer has spoken of a future where Palantir's software is inside every missile and inside every drone. And in Gaza, Amnesty International has named Palantir as contributing to the war crimes and genocide being committed. In fact, when a protester confronted Palantir's CEO about the killing of Palestinians in Gaza, 100,000 and counting, he replied, and I quote, "Mostly they were terrorists." That's true. Over 20,000 children have been killed, and the CEO of the company who's holding our NHS data called them mostly terrorists. And it's not just the NHS. Palantir is the second largest AI supplier to the UK public sector by contract value. It has contract with the Ministry of Housing, Cabinet Office, DEFRA, local authorities, and local police officers, including including in those in Leicester South. Minister, the contract review comes in early 2027. That window is still open. I want to share a scan with a specialist and get an answer before my patient leaves the room. Every clinician in this country wants that. Every patient deserves it. But the Seeing Stone is only as safe as the hands that hold it. Choose those hands carefully.
2023 in a letter I wrote to the Health Secretary in the previous government. I'm here today once again to raise my huge concerns, because I believe this contract is an affront to the values of our country and the NHS. Palantir's co-founder and chairman Peter Thiel, an historic Donald Trump backer and donor, has said the NHS makes people sick, calling for its privatisation. Palantir's business deals in chaos, oppression, war, all in the pursuit of power and profit, the very antithesis of the values our NHS was built on. I also note with keen interest that New York City Health and Hospitals have pulled out of a contract with Palantir due to some of the ethical concerns I will now outline. In its home country, Palantir's software enables the US Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, raids, forcibly separating unaccompanied children from their parents and carrying out prolonged detention and deportation. What's more startling, a leaked document showing the platform's ability to generate dossiers on individuals and mine data from the American Department of Health and Human Services. That's exactly the data Palantir now has access to. These should be nowhere near our NHS data and patient data, and this reflects the hundreds of emails I've had from extremely concerned constituents, which I'm sure shared across this House. People are genuinely frightened, and a loss of trust in the NHS is potentially catastrophic to health outcomes in the UK, as the Minister will know more than most. Palantir's reprehensible contribution to human rights abuses has been even more devastating in its complicity in the Israeli government's ongoing war crimes. A June 2025 UN report found Palantir's technology to have accelerated this campaign. Shameful that they're anywhere near anything that we've got to do in this country. Our NHS was built on a simple, powerful idea that healthcare is a human right, not a commodity. It was built on the trust of patients who must share personal details to receive the care they are promised. As a company arming slaughtered in the Middle East, mining American citizens' health data to conduct violent deportations and advocating the demands of the NHS, that trust cannot be Palantir's to hold. So we call on the government to exercise the break clause in this contract in 27, award no further contracts to Palantir and create a publicly accountable and ethically grounded approach in the handling of data.
Corbyn.
Thank you, Dame Siobhan. It's a pleasure to be able to speak in this debate, and I congratulate the member for Newton Abbot on an excellent speech and for securing this debate. This company received a massive contract from the UK government, apparently starting in about 2019. Some may recall that during that general election campaign, I accused the government of undertaking secret negotiations with US health providers to take over our NHS. What was the response of our media? That I was peddling Russian propaganda. They refused to engage in what was a serious point of a serious debate about the way in which US companies are trying to undermine not just the NHS, but our public services as a whole. Palantir already have £330 million within the NHS and are trying to get their hands on much else and are under threat, hopefully, in many other countries where they're trying to operate, such as Germany, where the human rights organisations are pressurising them because of their behaviour and their attitudes. What we have is this company getting its clutches into our NHS, and they appear to be pressurising every local hospital in NHS to join in the Palantir system. My local hospital, the Whittington Hospital, so far is not part of Palantir, and they have said apparently they don't wish to be part of it, as have many others. But what we need is a clear steer from the government. They didn't sign the contract. I don't blame the government for the contract. They inherited the contract, but they have the opportunity now to say they will end the contract when the opportunity arises, which isn't that far away, less than 18 months away until that contract can be ended. And say quite clearly that it will use the interim period to develop a publicly owned, accountable system within our NHS. We should be very proud of our NHS. It's universal, and Palantir are in danger of getting their hands on every single person who's lived or died since 1948's personal health records and everything else, which will mean that they can use those for research purposes. And since they're a conglomerate that goes across all kinds of other services and is involved in the war in Gaza and the attacks on the Palestinian people, surely it's time for us as a parliament to say, and I endorse what the member for York said, that we are challenging the government on this. Get this contract out of our NHS, bring it back in public hands.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's a pleasure to serve under you. I want to thank the member for Newton Abbot in securing this important debate, and also for the excellent speech demonstrating tremendous technical expertise. Now, this £330 million deal signed in 2023 with controversial American spy tech firm Palantir to use their tech on the federated data platform may turn out to be another gigantic waste of taxpayers' hard-earned money. And this isn't just about money. It's also a moral and ethical misstep, given this firm's links to work with the Israeli military and with the disgraced US Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency, so-called ICE. Members and the general public will be aware that health data provided for one purpose has been used to track, detain and deport so-called illegal immigrants in America. There are now persistent reports that issues of trust within the NHS and with the wider public over this firm's clear breach of data protection may lead the government to use a break clause in the contract in 2027 to prevent renewal of this 7-year deal. Now, I know that the BMA are not in the Secretary of State's Christmas card list, or possibly indeed the Minister, but he would do well to note the briefing they issued only yesterday, in which they call for the use of the break clause and the retendering of this contract. If the government is serious about tech sovereignty and investing in UK tech and AI, then this is what they must do. The rollout of Scotland's My Care app begins this month, with the Scottish Cabinet Secretary describing it as the most comprehensive NHS app in the UK, created in-house and free from dodgy tech giants. And that's a point I see the Minister laughing, but I want to reinforce that point because it was reinforced today by the First Minister in Scotland, John Swinney, at the launch of our manifesto. Now, to be fair, Palantir say that they will not use health data out with the NHS, as it would constitute a breach of contract, and of course it would be illegal. But England faces the rise of a political party who could change the law to suit their political purposes and ride roughshod over our basic privacy and human rights protections. If you don't believe me, look at the US of A. Now, in conclusion, I hope the Minister in his response will clarify if this situation is under review, and I urge the Government to consider their position, implement the break clause next year and invest in our own solutions, just as Scotland is doing. Thank you.
Thank you, James Board. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairship. And can I commend the determined forensic work on this topic by my honourable friend, the member for Newton Abbot. Now, the key reason I'm attending and speaking today is because we love our National Health Service for all its challenges and flaws. It's a key part of British society and identity, and we all want it to succeed. Now, there's no question that improved stewardship and use of data is important, but it has to be done with both public consent and trust, and Palantir's involvement in some of the critical change processes in the NHS place that at risk. My first concern is around the process and governance around appointing Palantir to its UK contracts. The process by which that was done has not been clear, and I think, as others have said, it is essential that this government seizes the opportunity to do the right thing and come clean on exactly how that contract was awarded to a company mired in controversy and with no previous healthcare specialist expertise. I'll give way to my honourable friend.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend, and would he not agree with me that the key issue, as Honourable Member for York raised, is accountability to this House for these contracts, because big contracts can be signed replete with assurances about protecting the public, protecting patients' data, only to morph into an entirely different kind of contract, different relationship and different company in the future.
I thank my honourable friend for his intervention, and I do very much agree with him that accountability to this House is always a critical consideration. The second concern is Palantir's track record and motivations. Now, I shan't repeat too much of what others have said, but its close ties with the US government and the US Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency, as well as its background in security and surveillance more widely, is a key concern, as well as its role supporting the Israeli Defence Force in the Gaza war. My biggest concern, and those of the dozens of constituents who've written in, concerns the geopolitical sovereignty and data protection implications. Dozens of constituents have contacted me about Palantir's work, business practices and leadership, which raise ethical and civil liberties concerns that are not compatible with UK values around privacy, democratic accountability and the responsible use of public data. And indeed, according to a YouGov poll in partnership with Foxglove, a tech justice campaign group, before the contract was awarded, found that almost half of adults would opt out of sharing health data with the NHS if Palantir was granted the FDP contract. And under half of NHS trusts have started using the technology due to patients' and doctors' opposition. Now, there's a strong case for sovereignty over the UK's data, given that many allies in Europe also don't feel comfortable using American companies such as Palantir. And there are many suitable UK companies, or those from trusted and reliable allies, such as Cahoots, who are based in my constituency and provide a lot of software to government agencies. Dame Siobhan, the House in this chamber has been very clear about the concerns, and we all await the Minister's response as to what will happen next.
Danny Chambers.
Thank you, Dame Siobhan. It's an honour to serve under your chairperson. And I want to thank my honourable friend for the tenacity and also the expertise he has used to secure this debate. There's a huge amount of research, and that was an absolutely excellent speech. At a moment of rising global instability, it is extraordinary that we are prepared to trust the health of our citizens and the functioning of our NHS to a US corporation that does not share our values or our interests. Because outsourcing the storage, handling and analysis of NHS data to a foreign company, rather than securing the national and economic benefits of this work being done by a British or UK-led organisation, is yet just another unnecessary example of our reliance on others to keep our vital infrastructure running. Doctors and the public have made it clear that they do not trust this company. Fewer than half of NHS trusts have begun using this technology, in large part because of the concern from both patients and clinicians.
And if, as the Health Secretary says, the federated data platform is absolutely critical to the future of the NHS, then placing it in the hands of a company that staff and patients do not trust risks undermining that future from the outset. And this is the central issue. We hold doctors and nurses to the highest ethical standards, and rightly so. We expect them to protect confidentiality, to act with integrity, and to put patients first. So why are we asking them to use a system they do not trust and to stake their professional reputations on it? Palantir, this is not a neutral contractor. This is a company that is deeply embedded within the political ecosystem of Donald Trump, a convicted felon whose administration has repeatedly undermined international rule of law. A company that has worked hand in glove with the US Immigration Enforcement ICE, whose behaviour is morally and legally outrageous, and whose agents have operated like masked vigilantes in the deportation of individuals. And we are all aware of the tragedies that this rogue Trump organisation has left in its wake. Why are we allowing a Trump-aligned company to sit at the heart of Britain's most precious public service? Why are we comfortable placing NHS data in the hands of a company whose values are so clearly at odds with those of the British public? This is not a technical decision. This is a political choice. The NHS is not only one of our most important public services, it is also one of the largest areas of public spending. And therefore it is deeply concerning that Palantir's contract for the federated data platform is so heavily redacted that it makes scrutiny almost impossible. Yes, I will give way.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. Health inequality in the NHS for people of ethnic minorities is a challenge, and we need to address it. But New Orleans Police Department, the LAPD, they both terminated Palantir-powered predictive policing due to their systems reinforcing racial bias and creating feedback loops to over-police communities that were affected. So would he agree with me that not only is the company unethical, the leaders unethical, but the systems that they supply are unethical and racist?
That's a very important point there, my honourable friend there, and I believe Amnesty International, I believe, are here today, and others have, including voices within the NHS, have been raising serious concerns about the potential misuse or inappropriate sharing of sensitive data. The government must come clean as to how this contract was awarded in the first place and what steps it will be taking to bring it to an end. Madam Chair, to finish, we should be building NHS data processing capacity here in the United Kingdom. This is strengthening our resilience, backing our own expertise, building sovereignty in a more dangerous world. Instead, we're exporting control of one of our most valuable national assets. And so I ask the government today, use the break clause, stand with NHS staff, protect patient trust, and keep Donald Trump and his allies out of our NHS.
Government spokesperson.
Well, sir.
Opposition spokesperson.
I was expecting a promotion there, Dame Siobhan. Thank you very much, Dame Siobhan, and it's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship this afternoon. And may I start by congratulating the honourable member for Newton Abbot for securing this debate. He's brought forward an issue that sits right at the centre of how we shape the future of our National Health Service, how we use data, who we trust with it, and how we ensure technology supports care rather than complicates it. And this debate has been a thoughtful one, and in many respects it's been revealing. Because it's shown both the promise of the NHS Federated Data Platform and the unease that still surrounds it. And that tension really matters. I'm grateful for the number of significant contributions we've heard from honourable and right honourable members this afternoon, 13 from the backbenches by my count. And let me start by setting out where I think there is common ground across the House. The NHS is under enormous pressure. Demand is rising, complexity is increasing, waiting lists remain too high. And too often, clinicians are working without the full picture in front of them. Anyone who has spent time in the health service knows that this is not a system that lacks dedication. It is, however, a system that too often lacks coherence. Data is part of that problem. It is scattered, fragmented, and difficult to use in a joined-up way. Records do not always reliably follow the patient. Information is duplicated, delayed, or simply not available when it's needed most. And the consequence of that isn't just theoretical. It's time lost, it's inefficiencies, and at times it's patients not getting the care they should when they should. So the case for doing things better is a strong one. In fact, I think it's an unavoidable one. And the FDP is one attempt to respond to that challenge. It seeks to bring together information in a way that allows the NHS to work more effectively, helping clinicians, supporting managers, and ultimately with the aim of improving care for patients. And there are some early signs that this is beginning to deliver. Waiting lists have been cleaned up, and some hospitals have reported better flow through theatres and wards. And those are practical improvements. But clearly, as so often in government, the easier question is whether something can work. The much harder question is whether it will be accepted. And here there are clearly concerns. We've heard about reluctance in part of the workforce, not suggesting that is uniform opposition necessarily, but there is certainly hesitation and in some cases disengagement. We should be careful, however, not to exaggerate that. Big reforms in the NHS have always faced resistance, often at the start. That's not necessarily new, and of its own, it's not necessarily decisive. But at the same time, it's not irrelevant, because if the people expected to use the system don't have confidence in it, then its impact will always be limited. And so I asked the Minister, what is the assessment of staff engagement with the FDP, and how is the government ensuring that this is something done with the NHS rather than simply done to it? Because in the end, that will make the real difference. The same issue arises with public trust. People are right to care about their medical data. It's sensitive, it's personal, and it's deeply private. And once confidence is lost in this area, it's very difficult to rebuild it. Now, there are important safeguards in place. The data does remain under NHS control. The access is tightly regulated. The provider doesn't own or use the data for its own purposes. And the legal framework that underpins that is strong. And those are not minor points. They really do matter. But I think we also have to recognise something else. People are not just asking whether the system is safe today. They're asking what it enables tomorrow. Could the data be combined in ways that reveals more than people expect? Could systems evolve in ways not originally intended? Could future governments choose to use the capability in different ways? And those aren't unreasonable questions. They are the natural questions people ask when large new systems are created. So again, I ask the Minister, what more will be done to reassure the public about the limits of how NHS data can be used? And can he set out clearly where parliamentary oversight comes in if the use of data is expanded in the future? Because trust isn't built by reassurance alone, it's built by clarity and it's built by restraint. A significant part of this debate has understandably focused on Palantir, and it's right that it has. Palantir is now a major supplier within the NHS data infrastructure, as well as elsewhere across government. That raises legitimate questions, not just about capability, but also about dependence. For some, the concern is a political one. For others, it's about principle. But for many, it's something much more practical. What happens if we become too reliant on a single provider for something as critical as health data infrastructure? And I think that is a fair question. We should also separate, however, that from the broader argument about the company's international work. In a global economy, companies will inevitably work with different governments. That alone is not a sufficient reason to exclude them from public contracts in the UK. But the question of procurement design, competition and resilience is a different matter. So I'm not going to give way, if you'll forgive me, because I want the Minister to have sufficient time to respond to the multiple contributions today. So I ask the Minister, how is the government ensuring that the NHS is not locked into a single supplier over the long term? What is the plan for maintaining genuine competition in this space? And how easy would it be, in practical terms, to move to an alternative system if that was ever required? There are then, of course, the issues of resilience. Some have argued that the FDP creates a single point of failure. Others have argued that the current fragmented system is itself a weakness, and that greater coherence improves security and oversight. And both arguments deserve to be taken seriously. But the practical question remains, how resilient is this system to cyber attacks or technical failure? What safeguards are in place? And what happens if something goes wrong at scale? Finally, the last point I wish to address is that of governance. With the abolition of NHS England, there is now a question about where responsibility for the FDP properly sits. That matters because accountability can't be diffuse. So I'll take this opportunity to ask the Minister, who is responsible for the programme now, where does that accountability lie, and how will Parliament be able to scrutinise its performance going forwards? Better use of data has a real role to play in NHS reform, and the FDP may well prove to be part of that answer. But success will depend on more than just delivery. It will depend upon confidence within the system. Confidence from clinicians that the system helps rather than hinders them, confidence from patients that their data is properly protected, and confidence that from the public that their decisions are transparent, proportionate and properly accountable. If those conditions are met, this reform can succeed. If they're not, even the best designed system will struggle. So we, as His Majesty's Loyal Opposition, will support what improves care. We will welcome what works, but we will continue to ask questions that ensures this is done properly in a way that sustains public trust. And with that, I look forward to the Minister's response.
The Government Minister.
Thank you, Ms McDonagh. It's always a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, and I'm grateful to the member for Newton Abbot for bringing forward this important debate today, and grateful for his and honourable members' contributions to it. And of course, we should welcome the honourable gentleman opposite to his place in his first debate on the front bench. Ms McDonagh, we've heard a lot today about concerns and insights and interpretations about the NHS's technological architecture. Some would have us think that the FDP is synonymous just with one company. It is not. The FDP is fundamentally an NHS construct. It has multiple contracts awarded to a number of consortia, including Palantir, Accenture, PwC, Carnell Farrer and NECS, with different responsibilities to make sure that it's training, health expertise and security in the FDP. Ultimately, the FDP, the Federated Data Platform, is a federation of local trusts and ICBs within NHS England, each with their own version of the FDP, their own abilities to decide which information they put there on the basis of their own service needs and their governance arrangements. Whilst there should be scrutiny of Palantir and of any contract, we should also provide clarity about what the FDP is delivering for the NHS. It is my duty to make sure the FDP is improving patient and clinical experience and improving patient outcomes. Making the best use of data generated by the NHS, Ms McDonagh, and by social care is essential to transforming services, to improving outcomes for patients, and also to making sure we use the resources in the best manner possible. Lord Darcy's independent investigation into the NHS found that despite huge volumes of data, the last decade has fundamentally been one of a missed opportunity to prepare our National Health Service to utilise the latest technologies. The FDP is part of an infrastructure. It is not the infrastructure. It is not the only infrastructure. It is part of an infrastructure to resolve this gap. It is improving efficiency and generating savings across the health service worth up to £2.4 billion, according to independent estimates. Those independent estimates are being further bolstered by a commissioned study by Imperial College, which will look at the economic impact of the FDP. It is an important tool, therefore, for us being able to make the NHS fit for the future, whether it comes to clinical efficiency and indeed transparency of data and outcomes for patients up and down the country. It is important, before I go into more detail about what the FDP does, that I say what it does not do. It is not synonymous, for instance, with the single patient record. It is not synonymous with the NHS app, and it is not synonymous necessarily for linking primary care data with secondary care data. I'm going to carry on for a bit longer. The honourable gentleman from Aberdeenshire North and Moray East tempts me with his speech, and he knows I can't resist his temptation. He spoke about Scotland, He will know I'm an NHS surgeon in Scotland. I hope he thinks I can speak with some authority about the NHS in Scotland. So let me tell him a few things about the digital architecture in the NHS in Scotland. The NHS app has been running in England successfully for over 8 years. 3 out of 4 people in the NHS in England have that app. The app, to clarify, is not Palantir. It has been devised organically on the ground by NHS England, by clinicians and by technologists, and it now serves millions of patients to be able to book test results, to book screening, to book appointments, including GP appointments, to end the 8 a.m. rush. He talks about the My Care app in Scotland. That still remains a far-fetched dream and reality. The limit of the ambition of that app seems to be, as I understand, a dermatology service in one part of Scotland called Lanarkshire, for those that aren't familiar with Scotland. It is 1,000,000 miles away from what has been developed down here in England. I won't, because I'm going to carry on, and I'm going to tell him something further. While the NHS in England was quite happy to utilise the expertise of technologists up and down the country, including in Scotland, including in my own constituency of Glasgow South West, a company called Cohesion Medical. The Honourable Gentleman's government in Scotland, where they've been in government for over 20 years, refused that offer, and that is why my patients, my constituents in Scotland, are unable to access simple digital services. It is why my patients and my constituents in NHS Scotland are 30 times more likely to wait for treatment for over 2 years. It is why my patients and my constituents in Scotland are unable to access the optimal stroke therapy and optimal lung cancer screening. But I'll get back to the Federated Data Platform in England. The NHS Federated Data Platform connects health information held in different systems, helping to manage activity to improve productivity and outcomes. By connecting critical data streams, it can accelerate diagnosis pathways, streamline discharge processes, and ensure faster, more coordinated care that reduces waiting times for all patients. I would like to briefly describe a couple of examples. North Tees and Hartlepool NHS Foundation Trust use an FDP product called Optica to map the journey of the patient from being admitted to when they need to go home. They used to do this with spreadsheets, which were not always updated. Because of this, discharges were delayed, medicines were not sorted on time, in some cases time-critical medicines causing real patient harm, and patients were therefore impacted. Optica lets them see all that information in one place in real time. It has reduced the number of long stays by 1/3, and despite a 7% increase in admissions over that time, we are improving services overall. At the Mersey in West Lancashire...
Can I just say, the member has had very generous time allocation during this debate. If the Minister does not want to take your intervention, he doesn't need to.
At the Mersey and West Lancashire Teaching Hospital NHS Trust, they're using the FDP, Ms McDonough, to better manage the lists for planned surgery. This allows surgeons like me to operate on more people each day and is cutting waiting lists. This has been achieved through better use of data. And it would be a timely reminder that in England, we are improving productivity in the National Health Service, getting more operations done per list, getting back closer to pre-COVID levels of activity. It cannot be said in Scotland under the SNP government. I'll happily give way. I'll happily give way.
I thought the Minister was giving way, and rather than giving so much of his speech to cheap political points about Scotland, can I ask him to answer the question that was put to him several times by several members? Is the government considering a review of the break clause next year?
If the Honourable Gentleman has read the details of any contract that the government negotiates, whether this one or the previous one, he will know that those break clauses are there for a reason. And of course, we evaluate value for money at those times. And he talks about cheap. I tell him something. It's not cheap to have to wait over 2 years for NHS treatment in Scotland, which is 30 times more likely than in England. And that's why on May the 7th, the NHS in Scotland can get an upgrade with Anna Sarwar as First Minister and Jackie Bailey as Health Secretary. The FDP is helping people get the care they need more quickly and more efficiently. As a programme, it is a success. The FDP has exceeded every single target since its go-live date in March 2024. 137 NHS trusts are actively utilising the platform and have reported benefits. The programme is significantly exceeding its benefits forecast, with external independent experts validating these results. NHS England publishes data on how the FDP has benefited patients and the NHS. The data collected up to the end of March were published in May, and I can share these figures with you now. So, since go live in March 24, more than 100,000 additional patients have been supported undergo procedures in theatres, partly but due to increasing theatre utilisation. Nearly 94,000 people have been supported on their cancer journey, with 7% seeing a reduction in the time it took to diagnose their cancer. And there has been a 14% decrease in delays to discharging patients staying in hospital for more than 7 days, freeing up hospital beds for those who need it most. The contract awarded by the last government, the Palantir contract, was done on the basis of a successful bid, deemed to be significantly better by a significant order of magnitude by versus their competitors. It was judged the most economically advantageous and likely to deliver the best quality of outcome for patients. The contract was awarded with an overall value of up to £330 million over a maximum of the 7-year term. So far, £210 million has been invested as we scale up. The FDP is exceeding the benefits that we forecast, as I already outlined. But if the honourable gentleman will allow me, I think I'll be answering this point shortly. In the interest of time, and we have to be careful for interventions. But we live in a fast-paced technological world, and this always means that we look to the next provider possible to provide value for money. So it is right that there are break clauses in this contract to allow those evaluations to take place, and I can reassure all honourable members, as a clinician and as a minister, my North Star is always patient safety and quality and, of course, value for money. If at that point in the break clause we evaluate and we find there are other providers that can do the job better, of course, then that needs to be looked at and reflected upon. And I would not be doing my job properly, more generally, as the Health Innovation Minister and the Patient Safety Minister and the Life Sciences Minister, indeed, if I did not, at every opportunity, try and champion British business and British SMEs to become British PLCs. So I hope honourable members will take that as read. The contract has extension provisions and will be reviewed in line with standard contract management processes. We will decide later this year whether to extend it. NHS England will be transparent about this process and the evidence used, as we have been throughout our regular reviews of performance of this contract and the FDP. In terms of digital sovereignty, our priority is to give patients the care they need. As members will no doubt understand, for some essential IT services, it is simply not possible to develop in-house solutions as we seek the best from the market. And I reflect upon my own practice in Glasgow, in the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital, where the honourable gentleman for Aberdeenshire North and Moray East seems to think it's a panacea of publicly delivered technology. Well, I can tell him, when I walk into that hospital, I log into a Microsoft Windows screen. Then I open a programme built by a North American tech company to order test results. Then I open another programme built by a North American test company to have a look at the results of those tests. And then finally, if I want to check X-rays, I open a fourth programme built by a North American technology company to evaluate CT scans, MRIs and X-rays. I'll just go on for the interest of time. I apologise, my honourable friend. In the future, our goal is to see a vibrant UK market in digital and technology, which would give the NHS more choices and help improve standards. And of course, in that mix, I would unashamedly be pro-British about my ambitions, because this is the way we not only serve our NHS, but also support economic growth. At the moment, what matters is who controls the data and how this is governed, and I appreciate the sensitivities around that. I really do. Rightly for the FDP, this is a matter for the NHS and UK regulators. For vendor lock-in, I've also heard whether you think it is possible to remove companies like Palantir from the NHS. The answer is unequivocally yes, it is possible. And it would take, of course, time and planning to do that, to safely transition from one supplier to another, as it always does in the NHS, when patient safety is of the primary concern. And there are only a small number of companies, unfortunately, at the moment, that can do what we genuinely need them to do at the scale that we need them to do them. But the contract has multiple measures built in it to allow this greater freedom of choice. This includes making sure the NHS owns the intellectual property for all products, and that it is possible to migrate them to other providers. Data security is also at the heart and the foundation of our health innovation programme. Protecting personal data is at the heart of the FDP and the health innovation strategy. Most importantly, we have separated church and state in terms of service provision from data security. A separate company, IQVIA, provide the highest standard of privacy-enhancing technology for that data in the FDP. This means we can remove personal identifiers from the data where these are not required, ensuring privacy is maintained throughout. NHS England and NHS organisations retain full control as data controllers, including decisions about how data is used, who can access it, and which products are deployed. Palantir does not own the data, the products, or the intellectual property, nor can it use the NHS data for its own purposes. The FDP is a secure data environment. Security is built into its design and operation. It has been through national, technical, and cyber assurance with external oversight. It should also be understood, Ms McDonough, that the FDP is only for health and care purposes. It cannot be legally used for non-health purposes such as immigration enforcement, as has been promulgated. As honourable members will expect, my position on the owners and the executives of Palantir is very much the same as my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State. We are no fan of their politics. However, the FDP and the principles that underpin it are critical to the future of the NHS. Palantir operates with strictly a UK-regulated contract where the NHS controls all data, access is tightly governed, and information can only be used for agreed purposes, which benefits patients. I would expect any member of staff who did not in all conscience feel they could work with Palantir to raise this with their employer. In conclusion, I'll give way, yeah.
Raised the issue around patient trust. We know that 50%, over 50% of the public do not have confidence in this system, and as a result of that, they may not share vital health information with their clinicians. As a result of that, will he bring that into the consultation? He's only got 10 months until this trial period or first period runs out. So could he say more about the public perspective on the government consultation?
I'm grateful to my honourable friend for her representation. She will know no NHS system, no pathway can ever work without the confidence of the public, and of course that needs to be reflected in any evaluations that take place. And I'm hearing the concerns of my honourable friend loud and clear, and I'm hearing the concerns of honourable members across this place. It is right that we look to maintain the highest standards for our NHS. It is also true that the FDP has a role to play in delivering for the NHS, helping people get the care they need quicker and more efficiently. These are real outcomes, improving people's lives all through the better use of data. But honourable members often, rightly, on all sides of the House, challenge me to go further, faster on rare diseases, on rare tumours, on rare cancers. None of that is possible in modern medicine without data, without analysis of data. And therefore, just as I have a responsibility to make sure we are getting value for money out of all of the contracts that we place in the National Health Service and that we evaluate them regularly, members across the chamber also have a responsibility to be careful not to kind of put together and aggregate different components of the NHS and present them as a monolith of a technological solution. The FDP is and will continue to be an important component of delivering patient care in the NHS in England. Who contracts with it, of course, is open to question as we go forward and think about future contractual arrangements. But it would be disingenuous to suggest that the FDP is somehow the only technological solution or database or in the NHS. There are many others, and they will be doing good work, whether it's a single patient record, whether it's the Health Data Research Service, the NHS app, or primary care provider, NHS clinical systems. We must be careful not to conflate one technology with the next, and in doing so, alarm citizens and patients about what is happening with their data. I can assure members across this House, just as I did in 20 years of clinical service, in ministerial service, my North Star is transparency, is patient safety, is quality, and is providing the best of care to all patients up and down the country.
Wrigley to sum up.
thank the Minister for his comments. However, I think he is not informed accurately about the status of the contract. I have the unredacted contract here. Software delivery, none. The whole thing is on subscription, and the intellectual property of all specially written software, which is defined to include the data collection software, belongs to Palantir. None of this belongs to the NHS. It is in this contract. I can show the Minister if he likes. But I thank him for his agreement to work for the better future for constituents, and I think we all agree that what we need is a trustable route forward to work with data that will make the NHS a real force in the 21st century. Thank you.
The question is that this House has considered the NHS Federated Data Plan. As many are of that opinion, say aye. To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order, order. The sitting stands adjourned.